Once we rotate the mandala to compensate for the fact that we are in the southern hemisphere, we can determine the spot we are looking for as it relates to the scalene triangle. When we then transpose this to the map and compensate for the spherical nature of the planet and the fact that we are dealing with the more watery portion of our Earth, we can determine that the closest land to our reference point is in Papua New Guinea, specifically on an island once called New Ireland. New Ireland is a large island off the coast of another large island known as New Britain. Both of these are part of Papua New Guinea, which is itself part of a larger island known as New Guinea. The country follows a very unique blend of traditions and customs, having been also under Spanish and Portuguese, then Dutch and French, and also German control, as well as having a varied indigenous population with over 700 languages brought before the Europeans even learned of its existence. In 1945, New Guinea was captured from the Germans by the Australians, who maintained the islands for the British Crown until New Guinea received independence from Australia in 1975, although the people still remain British subjects. The Australians maintain a standing army at the ready in case Papua falls into chaos. The country is considered very poor. 70% of the population live in poverty. Papua is said to be on the brink of economic collapse. In recent years, the islands have been struck by earthquake and tsunamis. Even today, much of the island of New Ireland remains unexplored, particularly the mountainous regions. The obelisks of the northern and southern hemispheres and the independence of New Guinea may seem disconnected, but allow me to draw a timeline. The first obelisk, or observation tower, on our list was the Space Needle, which was built during the space race in 1962, exactly 100 years after the signing of the Homestead Act. No other was built until construction began on the CN Tower in Toronto in 1973, and then 6 years of construction began on the Sydney Tower in Australia in 1975, the very same year that Papua New Guinea was given its independence. After this, 15 years passed before construction began on the Oriental Pearl Tower in Shanghai in 1991. Although it was not completed until 1995, just as the Oriental Pearl was being completed, Auckland's Sky Tower, the Menara in Kuala Lumpur, and the Stratosphere in Las Vegas were all built over the 2-year period from 1995 to 1996. Finally, the Macau Sky Tower was built between 1998 and 2001, straddling both the line connecting Kuala Lumpur with Shanghai as well as the new century. But why build towers to draw attention to North Platte, Nebraska and New Ireland, Papua New Guinea? And what is the significance of the timeline? Imagine, if you will, that a series of secret societies were all working separately but in tandem to conceal the location of something which had been brought to North America even before the days of Columbus. As expansion moved westward, the item might be moved westward as well to keep it hidden. Ultimately, though, it may have gotten away from them during a period of great civil unrest. If one of their confederates managed to secure a position of power, he might manipulate the rules first to keep the secret area semi-lawless, but failing this, he might tool the rules to confiscate the property where it was secreted. Once it was back in the possession of the secret societies, the location would then have to be changed again, possibly several times, until it could ultimately be placed in a new remote location outside of the compass of the federal government. The new location would have to be kept very secret. However, a method of pointing out the location to other members of the secret societies should some tragedy occur would have to be devised. Since numbers and symbols are universal, the 100th anniversary of the year that caused the item to be moved would be a fine time to begin work on the new series of landmarks, designed to point the way for future generations should the traditional means of the societies to communicate meet with some devastation. Perhaps the plan would be for every 10 years to add another new landmark. So the Space Needle is built in 1962, then the CN Tower in 1972. But then, before the third landmark can be built, the plan is interrupted by murmurs from the new hiding place of civil unrest. Remembering how this had caused such havoc for them a century prior, the timeline is necessarily curtailed. A deal is made with the restless overseers of the secret site, and the same year a new tower is built on the land which had been in charge of these very overseers, and one more is hastily erected on a juncture on the diagram to cement the location of the previous hiding place. Plans are finalized for the first of the obelisks, and within 15 years they are all finished. Nonetheless, the changes to the timeline bother the secret society types and their lizard brains, so just to make sure that the significance of the towers is understood to future lizard brains, one more is built to celebrate a significant symbolic event, the turn of the century. But what could this secret hidden treasure be? And why would so many secret societies be needed to conceal and protect it, as well as to surreptitiously expose it? For centuries, the legend of the Templar Knights and the myths of the Holy Grail and King Arthur's quest have enthralled the conspiracy-minded. But for years, there has been speculation that the Grail was never actually a Grail at all. Many have noted that the French term for the Holy Grail is Saint Graal, and that Saint Graal literally means sacred grail, or vessel. Although this is not technically so. In French, it would literally be Grail Sainte. However, there is a legitimate Latin-based argument for the Saint Graal translation. It is then further noted that moving the G so as to make the letters read Sang Raal, this can be translated to mean blood royal, or royal blood. It was thus supposed that the Holy Grail was a secret that could bring the very foundation of the Christian Church tumbling down. In Dan Brown's novel The Da Vinci Code, he explores the theory that the Grail is the body of the Magdalene, and that she was the spouse of Jesus. Actually, I don't think that theory goes far enough. Consider that the Bible ties Jesus by family relation to David, either by 28 or 42 generations, depending on which gospel you read. The Bible also ties Abraham to David by patrilineal familial descent through 14 generations. And 21 generations earlier, the Bible connects Abraham to Adam. All of the numbers are multiples of 7, a very significant number in Kabbalistic numerology. However, if we give credence to the theory that Jesus and Mary were husband and wife, and if we allow for the theory that they sired children, then the lineage from that point forward is also significant. I give you the Merovingians. The Merovingians were a dynasty spanning 3 centuries, which began with a Frankish king named Merovech, and which continued for several generations until Charlemagne's imperialistic ambition led him to slaughter the Merovingian known as Dagobert II and usurp his throne. To validate his claim to the title, Charlemagne took several Merovingians as his brides. Thus, the bloodline continued through him as well as through Dagobert's son, Sigisbert IV, who fled to the south of France and changed his name to Plantard. The significant thing about the Merovingians, for our purposes, is that they claim to be the descendants of Jesus and Mary Magdalene through a daughter named Sarah. Thus, if we assume a continuation of the bloodline through Sigisbert and Charlemagne, we see that anyone who can connect his genealogy to Charlemagne, or the Plantards, can then claim a connection to Jesus, David, Abraham, and Adam. But such claims can only be proven if there is genetic material available to prove lineage. This would be where the secret societies come in. Groups like the Illuminati, Rex Deus, and the Priory of Sion would all have their part to play in making these genetic connections. Opponents of the Jesus bloodline thesis argue that the assorted objectives and methods of the various secret societies seem to be in conflict. For example, the Priory of Sion seem to be interested in appointing members of the bloodline to positions of political power, while the Rex Deus secret society is more interested in simply charting the bloodline and keeping track of the family tree. Some of the societies, such as the Illuminati, even seem determined to undermine the very religious beliefs that give this bloodline its significance.